Welcome Wargamers, this is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff, and today we are taking a look at the Lords of Change and Kairos Fateweaver himself. So we'll get to Kairos in a little bit, but let's start with what a basic Lord of Change is. These are the greater demons of Tzeentch. They're as big as it gets, top of the food chain. And as befitting a demon of their lord, they embody everything their god is like. This means they're defined by their mastery of magic, they are cunning and tricksy, but they stand apart from other greater demons because they're kind of more aloof. They kind of have their own plans and schemes in the back of their minds. They're not as necessarily in the moment as, say, a Great Unclean One or a Bloodthirster. Because while those demons may have plan B and C, Lords of Change have plans, X1 through Q9, right? I mean, there's just a bajillion plans going on in their minds. Now, when it comes to the very practical of Tzeentch waging war, these guys act as the general of Tzeentch armies. And typically they use magic and cunning and guile and tricks to reach their ends, to kind of see their plans go to fulfillment, to see fortresses brought down. However, it is noted that they are still powerful melee fighters. They have the bulk and the just sheer presence to make a difference on the battlefield when it gets to hand-to-hand combat. That being said, the real weapon that a Lord of Change brings to the battlefield isn't necessarily the magic or the sword, but it's their intelligence. These are deeply intelligent creatures, but they're uncaring of consequences. In fact, they're almost fascinated by them. So to come up with a plan and see the many ways to see it come to fruition, that's what interests and intrigues them. And so say there's a fortress in front of them, there might be 8 ways to penetrate this fortress, and he'll set a plan in motion for all of them. And some might contradict each other or get in the way, it doesn't matter. The plans will be fulfilled and the fortress will come down. What this means is that if you're on the defending end, you have no idea what's coming at you. It looks like chaos, for lack of a better term. And more so than any other greater demon, they love to meddle in the affairs of mortals. To put this in perspective, they are like a kid who plays with an anthill. Right, when we were kids, we all did this at some point. We don't care about the ants, we don't think of them as living things, we just toy with them, maybe destroy what they're building, help them build stuff if we think, put more dirt on there. Whatever our kind of scheme in our mind as a child is, we have no concept of the consequences that we put in motion. And it's that curiosity of consequences and apathy towards them that makes a Lord of Change truly horrific to mortals, just as we were horrific to the ants. When you apply that kind of thinking to a battlefield role, it's truly, truly terrifying. Moving away from how they wage war, I want to talk about the temperament of a Lord of Change. And they have this reoccurring cycle of plans in their mind, right? They love to make plans and schemes and backstab each other and all that kind of stuff. They'll destroy a world for the sole purpose of having refugees spread about, and then they'll redirect history, create hope, by building those refugees into a nation, crush it by having the nations fight each other, and have this circle going on. And they'll manipulate people's ambitions and make them feel like, oh, I'm the king of the world, and then crash them down. I mean, there's eternal plans in motion. These guys play the long game, and they play a very complicated game of 3D chess on multiple levels. But that's something that's really stressed in this book, is just the far-reaching implications. We'll talk about it more in this week of Tzeentch, but they really have a sinister, kind of insidious aspect to them. That even when Sigmar was making these new cities in the Mortal Realms that we saw in, say, the Firestarter campaign or the Seasons of War, he knew that this was coming, Tzeentch did, and so he set plans in motion to infiltrate all of those. Why? Because he builds nations, crushes them, that's his plan, right? They are the long game incarnate. They can go forever. And to us, this makes them seem very unpredictable and shrewd. We don't see the plan that they have from their perspective, we just see a small sliver of it, and so it looks like madness or contradiction or all these kinds of various things, but the fact of the matter is that if you have the right perspective, you see the plan coming together. And this is a reoccurring theme with all Tzeentchian forces. You'll see warbands fight each other. Why? Because they didn't know they were going to be there. Well, it's because 2 Lord of Change both have the same plan, and they sent the wrong troops in place. There's schemes within schemes within schemes, and they contradict each other. They push back on each other. They succeed wildly. I mean, a lot of things are always at play when you talk about a Tzeentch army. And while this makes them seem almost invincible because they can come at you from so many different directions, the truth of the matter is that their manipulative nature is almost a fault, right? It's almost a compulsion, because they might have a plan that's going perfectly, and their compulsion is to put a twist in that plot that makes it more complicated for themselves. Now, why would they do that? Well, at the end of the day, whoever gets to say, I had the most complicated and convoluted plan that worked on bajillion different levels, and it was the perfect plan, right? That's what the goal is. I want to have like the Rube Goldberg machine of destruction. So they could have been winning very easily, but they kind of throw a wrench in their own plans to complicate it so that they can say, look how complicated this was. And that's kind of what tempers that unstoppability. Now, moving into organization, there are, of course, as you might expect, 9 different ranks of Lord of Change, 9 being Tzeentch's favorite number. And these ranks fluctuate. Khorne had very static levels for his Bloodthirsters. These Bloodthirsters do blank, right? Not so with the Lords of Change. They generally operate independently, however, a 1 rank is always called Exalted. Exalted just simply means you at this moment in time have the favor of Tzeentch. Now here's the thing, no one stays there very long, right? This is not a pyramid hierarchy where, you have these Lords of Change who are above these ones like Khorne has. This is a rotating scale, right? This is like your local league who names go up and down on the bracket. So whoever's at the top of the bracket is Exalted, and he will get knocked down to first place if he screws up, and eventually, over millennia, he will. It's also noted that Tzeentch's ranking system is inconceivable and entirely arbitrary, meaning he just got tired of seeing the same person as Exalted and knocked him down a peg. Point is, if you're looking for approval from Tzeentch, that's not a very smart idea. But now that we've talked about Lords of Change in general, let's talk about Kairos Fateweaver, because he's a very special Lord of Change. In Tzeentch's slice of the Realm of Chaos, there exists his kind of mansion, right? It's called the Impossible Fortress. And that's where he resides. It is a place that is constructed of impossible shapes, colors that can't be perceived by everyone, walls that are actually doors that are actually walls, and it is just inconceivable. People go insane just walking through this fortress if you don't have the right mindset. And inside the depths of this fortress, there is something called the Well of Eternity. Now, we don't know the origins of the well, but it seems to be a receptacle of knowledge and a pure arcane. Whenever knowledge is lost somewhere in the universe, it kind of never goes away, it just migrates into the well, which of course makes it this impossibly massive repository of information, of spells, of just literal factual information, and so on. Tzeentch often spends his days sitting by the well, peering inside of it, trying to seek answers to questions that he has. Remember, Tzeentch is not all-knowing, he's just a master planner. And as such, not wanting to kind of hurt or injure himself, is afraid to actually go into the well and see what's in there. Well, one day, he picks up his favorite Lord of Change, a very normal Lord of Change named Kairos Fateweaver, who at that time was Exalted, and chucks him into the well, just to see what would happen. And a long time goes by, and eventually, Kairos comes out, but he is very, very changed. Because just like every other Lord of Change, he used to only have 1 head. Now he comes out with 2. The right head sees all possible futures clear as day, and the left head sees the past without bias. It is actual, factual, perfect information. Neither the left or the right head can actually see the present. And what's actually funny is that this allows Kairos to see things that Tzeentch cannot, because all possible futures and a clear understanding of the past is just so much information. It's like he took that part of the well with him. Where a normal Lord of Change, tries to orchestrate the future, being able to see all the paths to how things are going to go is very different. Likewise, we have a lot to learn from our history, and so being able to see it without bias is an amazing ability. Kairos Fateweaver has an unparalleled use of magic. However, he is very vulnerable to melee damage, simply because the future does not reveal itself fast enough for him to block a hammer strike. If you go in there and you start pounding his face in, he can't see what's happening to him in that moment. He sees that a punch is coming, but it's too quick to respond to, and then immediately afterwards, he saw that a punch just happened from the other head, but there's no in-between where he's actually getting punched. And really at this point, Kairos has 2 main functions. He sits by the Well of Eternity, and he tells Tzeentch everything that he's seen or will see. And this is kind of a full-time job. Tzeentch's curiosity for the Well of Eternity is kind of harped on in his book quite a bit. And when he gets tired of listening, Tzeentch will send Kairos out to wage some war, just to get him out there doing things that a Lord of Change should be doing. And so those are the facts about Lords of Change and Kairos, but why are they cool? We're going to start with what's cool about Lords of Change in general, of course. Magic is something that I have recently come to appreciate in Age of Sigmar. By that I mean, I tend to just like swarms of guys. I'm very much a Warhammer Fantasy Battle guy at heart in that regard. I like just swarms of infantry smashing into each other and stuff like that. But as I have picked up Disciples of Tzeentch, I'm really beginning to appreciate, at least narratively, these masters of fate and magic. As generals on the battlefield, Lords of Change just have that very special presence, right? I mean, as a model, but also as a thematic piece. Everyone wants to be a part of their plan. However, everyone is also nothing more than a pawn to them, because perspective is a big theme in this army. Tzeentch can see a lot of different possible futures, and he manipulates his Lords of Change to make it happen. Likewise, the Lords of Change each have a plan in their own, how to achieve Tzeentch's goals, but they do the same things to mortals and lesser demons, manipulation on a grand scale. And what this really means is that no one in this army knows the whole picture, because Tzeentch doesn't know how things are going to plan out. He can't see with perfect clarity how things are going to go. So of course you multiply that by 9 levels of Lords of Change that each have probably 9 whatever factions beneath them. There's a lot of moving parts, and I just feel like everyone wants to be a part of this plan, but no one actually sees the whole thing from start to finish. And Lords of Change are kind of just the biggest gears in that kind of clockwork mechanism. Now, when we're talking about Kairos specifically, that theme of perspective is amplified, because one side sees the past without perspective, and you can learn so much from the past. I can't emphasize that enough, because imagine if you could see chaos entering the mortal realms, right? Then you would see heroes hiding treasures all over the place so that chaos wouldn't find them. Okay, well now you know where they are, because you saw the past without bias, right? It wasn't from any fixed viewpoint. You know that this hero had this treasure here. You got to see Nagash lock everyone up in Shadespire, so you know the secrets that are in Shadespire and you want them. Like, it's just an immense amount of information when you can see everything in the past clearly. And if you want to make a narrative purpose for your Disciples of Tzeentch army to exist, having been sent out by Kairos Fateweaver to retrieve something makes perfect sense. Conversely, keeping with the theme of perspective, you have the head that can see all possible futures. And here's the problem with seeing all possible futures, is that you're not always sure which one is actually happening, right? One head has the perfect perspective on the past, another one has the worst perspective on the future, because you can't really interpret the things that are happening to you in that moment. There's a lack of perspective until events start happening. And not being able to see the present, it kind of voids his personal perspective, like literally Kairos' Fateweavers, from what his heads can physically see. It limits his perspective immensely, that no one can actually see the present. And the last little dialogue I want to end with is that his dialogue in the Realm Gate War books, he only made a small brief appearance, but his actual little dialogue, what he said, is super cool. He appeared in the Realm of Metal. Right as the Stormcast were coming down, there was a Chaos Sorcerer who was actually guarding Galmaraz. Unbeknownst to him, that's what it was. And Kairos Fateweaver was kind of orchestrating this plan to keep that hammer locked away. And he's speaking to this Chaos Sorcerer, and the dialogue is so cool, because like both heads they're arguing with each other, but also complimenting what they say. So one will say like, history has shown us this won't fail. And the left head will say, but we know that history changes all the time, right? Because they're bickering based on their perspectives, but they are collectively having a soul conversation with one person. It is very cool and very interesting to read. I think that was Warstorm, if I'm not mistaken. And folks, that is all the things that I had to say about Lords of Change and Kairos Fateweaver. These are incredible models, as well as just kind of narrative pieces on the tabletop. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming.